She threw a cup of hot tea at my face because I refused to show her something on the computer. Siblings of narcissists, psychopaths, or sociopaths, what's your experience? My brother was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder at 16. He's never had empathy. Children learn empathy at some point, but it was like he never reached that developmental stage. He was unconcerned when people got hurt. He hit and bullied others in school to get what he wanted. Doctors, therapists, medication. Nothing made a difference, and it's not like there was some kind of trauma or a reason for his behavior. It's like he was just born wrong. When he was 10 he started taking and dealing drugs. As a drug runner for some older teens, you can't be prosecuted under 14 in Germany. My parents called our version of CPS for help. He got more therapy, some inpatient stays and his own social worker. He stole my dad's car when he was 12 and got picked up by the cops. He got his first charges at 14, drugs and assault. My parents were at their wits' end and agreed to have him placed in a group home for troubled teens for a year. He was kicked out shortly before the year was up. He came home and seemed to recognize in a clinical, detached kind of way, that he couldn't go on like this without ending up in prison. He was about 15. He started being less violent, but he had insane delusions of grandeur and needed everyone to comply with whatever he wanted. If they didn't, he lashed out. My parents still made him go to therapy. He assaulted my dad and choked him because he didn't want to. My brother was 16, but also 6 feet 3 inches and about 190 pounds. My dad died from a sudden aneurysm when he was 16, and he went off the rails completely. He got a girl pregnant and she was kicked out by her mom. My mom took her in. The girl was not a bad person, just had some issues, so it wasn't that surprising that she'd date my brother, who could be charming if his situation demanded it. He beat her up at our house a couple months later while she was still pregnant. That was the last straw for my mom. She kicked my brother out. We helped the girl to find an apartment for her and the baby. Unsurprisingly, my mom caved a short while later and let my brother move back in. He seemed to think he was the head of the household. My parents never married, so my father's modest possessions went to me and my brother instead of my mom, and that included the car my dad bought a year before he died. It was the first brand new car he ever bought, a small one, but he was proud of it. My brother made my mom sell it so he could get his half of the money. It wasn't even an expensive one, and my mom was devastated to lose my dad's little car. I was 20 then, my brother was 17. He was verbally abusive and basically tortured my mom mentally. He threatened to hit me on a daily basis whenever I didn't do something or give him something he wanted. He also threatened to kill me a couple of times. On a particular bad day he told my mom that he'd have no trouble to get a couple guys to run her off the road when she went out. When the threats got stale, he'd beat me up every couple weeks. There was one particular instance where I was actually afraid he was going to kill me. He did his usual spiel of using me as a verbal punching bag because he had a bad day, and I was just burned out. Didn't even react anymore. He hit me a couple of times and choked me. No idea how, but I fought him off, grabbed my phone and ran to the bathroom where I locked myself in before he could get to me again. He was trying to beat down the door while I called the cops. The cops did nothing. Told me he lived there, so we'd have to get along, and since we both said opposing things, nothing would come of it. I insisted they take my statement. My mom wasn't home at the time, but she was a wreck anyway and couldn't deal with it anymore. A couple days later, my aunt came to visit for a couple of days. My brother was his charming, manipulative self for her. My aunt tried to pressure me into not pressing charges, since apparently I gave myself the dozens of bruises and contusions I had, as my brother had told her. I was severely suicidal at that point and gave my mom an ultimatum, me or him. She kicked him out again. He came back a year later, and I moved out for college immediately. I don't blame my mom much anymore, rock and a hard place and all that, but she never could understand the fact that her love for her son was misplaced. He didn't have the things that made someone human. He had no empathy, he was not capable of love, he was just an empty shell that went through life trying to get whatever pleasures he so desired by whatever means necessary. I haven't spoken to or seen him in about 7 years, but my mom's still in contact with him. He went to Spain when the mother of his daughter tried to get child support. Sometimes, my mom still talks about the things he's done. A couple examples. For some reason, his ex-girlfriend started letting him see his daughter, and she flies to Spain with my mom once or twice a year. Or used to, anyway. He locked her in the basement with an adult-sized portion of food she threw up on because she couldn't eat anymore. She was 4, hard to remember, or so. She doesn't want to go visit him anymore. He withheld rent from his Spanish landlord for like 6 months. The landlord had terminal cancer and my brother saw it as a waste to give money to a dying man. He married a girl in Spain and had another kid, and he now makes a living as a realtor. From what I've heard, he still thinks he's God's gift to mankind. I don't think I'd even go to his funeral if he dies. My daughter was hit by a drunk driver and nearly died when she was 12. She was in a coma for 2 weeks and I was there all day every day, except to go home to shower and change. My sister decided that when I was at the hospital was the perfect time for her and her druggy girlfriend to jimmy the sliding door off the track, break in and steal everything she could find. Jewelry, my camera, and yes, my daughter's piggy bank. This monster stole the piggy bank from a comatose kid. My sister has never been diagnosed with narcissism or a personality disorder other than OCD, but when we were younger she often enjoyed telling people before I met them that I had a difficult relationship with the truth so that they wouldn't want to be around me. I had the reputation of a liar and no friends for most of my preteen years, and she was popular in our homeschool group until she left and got into high school. After she left, I still didn't have friends, but neither did she, and she blamed me for it during her frequent temper tantrums. She would throw things, scream, cry, and threaten me with kitchen knives on a pretty regular basis. All of a sudden, the year that I turned 17 and she turned 21, the tantrums stopped and she got engaged. He moved in with us, the tantrums started again, and for once I wasn't the target. The worst fight they had happened when she caught him looking at a photo of a bikini model, which she considered cheating. She hit him full force with an open palm, and when our mom saw it, she threatened to kick her out if she hit him again. They got married, moved out, and divorced within a year of him enlisting in the army. It's interesting really. My mom died recently. When I called my sister to come down the day before she died, she said, "I thought she was going to die today. I'm not disappointed, but I can't keep missing work." The next day I called her to come to the hospital again as the doctor and I made the decision to take her off the ventilator. On the phone she said, "Well, can we pull out the tube as soon as I get there because I have plans tonight?" She also proceeded to ask me for rent money that day, as I also live with her. The things they say, and don't realize how messed up it is really baffling. When she threw a cup of hot tea at my face because I refused to show her something on the computer. Or the time when she yelled at me for over an hour because I was really sick and had thrown up all over the bathroom sink. The same bathroom she had just cleaned. I stopped speaking with her over 7 years ago. Brother believes the world is his oyster and that friends and family and loved ones are his to control and exploit. He told a girl they are dating that she should buy him a car and take him out for dinner. Brother has also tried to burn down our childhood home thrice because mom didn't give him the things he wanted. We were poor and he knew that, but he honestly believes that he gets what he wants because that's how it should be. He also tried to sell my car. He still hounds me for the money he should have gotten if he sold it. My brother was one of those grandiose narcissists. A typical example of his everyday behavior was the time he purchased a can of an uncommon brand of cola. And then bragged for days about it as though he had discovered the cure for cancer or something, all because it wasn't Pepsi or Coke, those were for common people. My mom would hang on his every word. She pretty much lived vicariously through him, and he could do no wrong in her eyes. He could act like a jerk towards me and she would make excuses for him, no matter how awful it was. However, once when he didn't like the birthday gift I gave him, she acted like I had committed a crime. Our parents were really against drugs. However, when my brother decided to grow marijuana in our house, our mom was enthusiastically supportive of it. However, a few years later when I smoked pot and my parents found out, well, suddenly I was the one who ruined Christmas for the family. My brother was living 3,000 kilometers away when my mom became gravely ill. I phoned him and told him he needed to get out here pronto if he wanted to say goodbye. The best he could manage was to come out a week later. She hung on for that week waiting for him to show up. When I would visit her at the hospital and say, "I'm here, Mom," she would respond with, "I want your brother." She instructed the hospital staff to not tell me anything, so when I would ask how she was doing I would get a "that's private confidential information" type of response. Meanwhile, my brother would phone the hospital daily and they would tell him everything about her care, from the medications she was on, her blood work levels, her treatment options. It was pretty much palliative by that point, and all that. I could not even get "she slept well last night" from the nurses, but he could tell me her blood oxygen levels from 3,000 kilometers away. Every day that I talked to him I would ask him if could not come out sooner. But he could never get away from work, even though he was one of the highest-ranking people at his job. I took care of the house while she was in the hospital. I cleaned up all the diarrhea, did her laundry, took care of the bills, but wasn't a welcome visitor to her bedside. When he finally did show up, he visited her for a short while, then said, "Let's go for lunch," to me. She passed away as soon as we stepped out of the hospital. She hung on just to hear him say hello. When I was 10, my mom put a lock on my door because my brother started threatening to kill me and my mom during the night. When I was 14, he fixated on my mom and threatened to burn down our house, shoot my whole family, and steal all the valuables and drive away. That same year, he was 17, he took our car and ran away from home for 2 weeks. We ended up calling the police on him. When he came home, the police decided that it would be best if he lived somewhere else, so he did. As we were cleaning out his room, we found hundreds of knives, a handgun, lighter fluid, gasoline and lighters. Lived an entire lifetime not being aware that it isn't normal to run to your bedroom and hide when dad gets home. That it isn't normal to be scared of your parents' reactions to, well, anything. Becoming a mom and having little kids that I just looked at and knew I could never beat them up for picking a flower, or shame them for not knowing how to hang a shelf, or throw grubs at them if they come outside, or throw potato salad at them if they say they don't want any. Yeah. It wasn't normal, and only just now am I realizing all of that. They can make drama out of any situation and will try to drag you into it even years later. Example, I am the next to youngest. My whole family is a freak show, but when I was planning my wedding, I was still trying to pretend I had a reasonable family. My future husband's family was like Leave It to Beaver. So I asked both of my sisters to be bridesmaids. I knew this was a risk, but I hoped they could keep their crap together for a single evening. At the time, I thought they had. About 8 years later, we were in the same city because one of our brothers was in the hospital due to a bad car accident. We had one hotel room across the street from the hospital so people could go rest when they needed to. I was in that room with my oldest sister when she said, "You know, middle sister, stole wine glasses from your wedding, right?" I told her I didn't care. A couple of hours later, I was in that room with my middle sister. She said, "You know, older sister, stole glasses from your wedding, right?" I also told her I didn't care. So here we are, waiting to see if our brother was going to die, and both of these monsters are playing reindeer games with me, trying to make me be angry with the other one. Our brother lived. I've cut contact with all my siblings because they are all like this. They have to start BS no matter what the situation or consequences. I was playing with a suitcase while watching TV. I was small enough to fit myself in it. My brother, nearly 4.5 years older than me, saw what I was doing and asked to zip me up in it. After already having learned to never trust him, I asked Mom to watch us to make sure he didn't do anything stupid. He zipped me up inside the suitcase and started carrying it in a shuffle step. Thump. 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 I heard the sliding door to the enclosed patio open. Mom started screaming and I could hear her slapping my brother repeatedly. The suitcase fell over onto its side with me still in it. I managed to pry open the zippers from the inside and got myself out of the suitcase as quickly as possible. Mom was still slapping at my brother, screaming why? I was 2 feet away from being dumped inside a suitcase into the family hot tub. He laughed and said that I would have floated. What's the big deal? So, yeah, that's what it was like growing up with a sociopath. My older sister and I used to physically fight and such when my family was here. Then I lived with her and my brother in a duplex for school. I had to clean up everything. If I told her to clean her own stuff up, she would yell at me and follow me around if I wanted to get away from her. She had thrown all of my stuff that she could get her hands on outside in the backyard, which is the main entrance for the place, my clothes, electronics, glasses, etc., some broken and ripped, all because my boyfriend and I had left for class after she asked me for a ride with us 5 minutes before I had to leave. Boyfriend had a car, I didn't. She would constantly monopolize the car my mom left for all of us to share, so I would have to take the bus or ask friends or my boyfriend to take me to the grocery store to buy groceries. Throughout our childhood and in our teenage years, she'd tell stories that were pretty convincing, but when talking to someone else involved, nothing like that happened. She knew I liked one of her friends and then proceeded to have sex with him the following week. She'd always get my mom to shell out cash for her, and she'd spend it on drugs. The final thing is when she would not leave me alone since she thought that I had her boyfriend's clothes. I didn't. When I was trying to do homework in my room, she wouldn't leave my room, so I had to leave or try to drag her out. My brother tried to help, But he gave up and just played some games in his room. I had gotten her out of my room and locked the door so she wouldn't get in, but she kept pounding the door and screaming at the top of her lungs for hours. It was so stressful. She then threatened that she will beat me up and plunge a knife through my chest once she got the door open. Then she acted as if she was the victim when I called my parents and let them hear what she was saying. I got super stressed and wanted her to stop, so I opened the door and quickly punched her in the face, then closed the door again. It was quiet for a minute, but then the threats came in again, more pounding on the door. Also, when my friend came to pick me up, since I was at my wit's ends, she tried to make my friend think I was the person who started the argument, said that I broke her bracelet. It broke when she kept pounding on the door. I just grabbed important documents, my school stuff, and clothes, and left for 1 to 2 months. My parents were saying that it was equally my fault for what happened. I don't know how. Funny thing is that she left the place once I came back, and my parents blamed me for it and kept telling me off. They did not do that to my older sister when I was out of the house for months. They told me I broke the family, and that a few years down I will be laughing about the whole incident. Haven't laughed about it. I don't talk to my sister, and she has tried speaking to me, but I don't want her in my life anymore. My parents give me BS about it, saying that we should make up and be a family again, but I get panic and anxiety attacks at even the thought of my older sister. I've had constant nightmares for a solid 3 to 4 months of my older sister coming to my place and just beating me up, making me do drugs with her. She puts a needle in me mainly, stabbing me, chasing me and threatening me. I still get very anxious when I think I see her somewhere. We live in the same city. Last I heard she was still going to the same college. I'm not sure now though. Brother was doted on as a child because he was gifted at basketball. Literally had no consequences growing up and could do whatever he wanted. Treated me and our parents like absolute crap, and they still doted on him, while I would get the belt for the most benign and asinine stuff. My brother's life is absolute crap right now. He has no sense of self-worth and just gets handouts from my parents. He is in his late 30s and my parents are giving him money for rent and food. He wants everyone to feel sorry for him and expects everything to be handed to him. He can't do anything on his own and guilt trips and manipulates my parents into doing whatever it is he needs doing for him, or just giving him extra funds. He has no incentive to change and is content playing video games all day while my parents just enable his lifestyle. At holidays he just talks down to me and tries to make me feel bad about how difficult his life is. I could not care less about him, and have no desire to talk to him until he makes some serious changes in his lifestyle and life choices. She called the cops and CPS, repeatedly accusing our stepdad of child abuse. It usually lined up with her having rules and punishments. She didn't like that my parents did research on how to raise a psychopath that doesn't become a murderer. They suddenly knew all her tricks and tactics. I sometimes think about how sad it must be to be physically incapable of feeling human emotions, but it clearly would only hold her back. Her diagnosis was emerging antisocial personality disorder because they said they couldn't diagnose someone under 25 as a psychopath. Dad acts really similar, so I assume whatever she has, he has that too. Now that I'm more awake, I lost almost all of my friends. My family, besides my immediate, totally ignore me because me and my mom protected my stepdad by saying my sister was lying about the abuse. Just to be clear, we were investigated multiple times and CPS said they were doing a phenomenal job raising so many kids with so many mental health issues so well. They put down that they were false claims the first 2 times, and after that they were like, we just have to investigate to be sure, just do the interviews and get it done. We have to do it every time, which I do appreciate the diligence if a child is really being abused, but we had stuff from therapists and counselors that were all like, has a history of lying, tells lies to get what she wants, and my entire family still thinks we're protecting a monster. The real kicker is that our biological father is also a psychopath and actually a child abuser. Guess who she moved in with when my aunts refused to let her go back to my mom's? If you guessed, our actually abusive dad, who was now basically giving her psychopath 101 courses just by being near each other, then you're right. All our family who banded together in a fickle justice brigade about child abuse are now BFFs with the guy who used to threaten to break my legs and choke me and hit me when I was 7 or younger. I'm sure it makes my mom feel great too, knowing that all her sisters took her abuser's side after a lengthy divorce battle that he kept coming back with more and more affidavits for, and just drained her emotionally and financially for years on end. I could write a book about how much they've all hurt me, by being or enabling a psychopath. I'm pretty certain that at least some of my aunts are narcissistic. Last week my grandma went on a tirade about me not forgiving, but no one has ever apologized or even acknowledged that they did anything wrong. I won't rug sweep something that still hurts me regularly, and apparently that makes me that problem again. My little brother is a narcissistic sociopath and psychopath. I come from a culture where the family bond is incredibly important, and no matter how bad your family is, always forgive them, protect them and take care of them. For 25 years we lived through hell because of that piece of human excrement. It really pained me, but I gave up on him years ago. My mother, however, being a Turkish mom, forgave him countless times, but he only got worse. I mean, I knew something was wrong back when we were still kids, but I would still always do my best to be the good brother and role model. I would always protect him and simultaneously get the blame for all his mistakes. My mother was in the hospital giving birth to my youngest sister. We were home alone and he asked me if he could go out and play in front of our house. We have a great park in front of our home and live in a very green area. I gave him permission only for his friend to come back an hour later and tell me that my 11-year-old little psycho brother, I was 13, we might have been a bit younger, was arrested for theft. We were a well-off family, he was my mom's sweetheart. He never needed money or needed to steal, he did it just for attention. Just because he was upset our sister might take his place. I had to pick him up and I remember crying out of shame while this butthole had a smile from ear to ear. He didn't care. Police brought us both home, my parents were back from the hospital with my little sister and the house was filled with friends and acquaintances. I remember feeling so much shame and embarrassment, profusely apologizing to my mom. I felt responsible. As the years passed by, this became worse and worse and worse, and we all basically lived in a constant state of terror and anxiety because of this lousy subhuman piece of excrement. I'm too embarrassed to share most other stories and I'd rather just not think about them anymore. We've finally cut him out of our life after 25 years. Imagine having to hide all your stuff because your house is never safe. Never being able to ask for anything as a teen because if I ask for 5 my little brother has to get 50. Imagine having to worry if you can leave because this little terrorist might threaten your mother and steal her stuff or take her money. For a while he had a really pretty girlfriend. My mom hoped this would help him to normalize, and he treated her like she was his property. This one time he was yelling and threatening her, dragging her off the stairs. I heard the commotion and when I saw it, I rushed to them, slapped him on the face and put him in a chokehold, told him if I ever heard him behave like that I'd break his legs. This allowed this poor girl to run off and get out of our house with my little brother yelling how he would end her. He later explained to me how he got angry because she talked back and wouldn't lend him money. At this point he spent €1,500 a night in clubs. When she finally dumped this piece of excrement, he called her dad to tell him. His daughter was a filthy girl and sent him pictures of her underwear, etc. He then became incredibly depressed, not because he loved her. He always talked about breaking up with her and how she bored him, etc. But because she was his property and how dare she leaves him. He owned her. He then took my parents' new car and smashed it into a wall for attention. Just fast enough that he totaled the car, but also slow enough that he came out of the car without a scratch. I mean, he had his own car, a new BMW that he also got by manipulating my mom. But he didn't use that, he used my parents' car. He claimed his car had no gas. I checked it and it was full. He then emotionally manipulated my mom about how he was suicidal, blaming us for not being more supportive. He used this for months as an excuse for his bad behavior and intensified daily. The only person he actually feared was me, so I felt this incredible burden on me to try and keep him in check. I couldn't leave him alone with my mom. I couldn't move out because I was worried sick he might kill her one day. I tried to talk with him but no amount of talking worked. He made 1,000 promises, then came up with some lame excuse about how 19 years ago me once hitting him, so this was all my fault. I hit him because he was about to smash this kid's face in with a rock. Or how he was once grounded and had to stay in his room for 2 days so he was psychologically scared. I mean, I beat up at least 50 kids for this piece of human garbage. He'd always intentionally pick a fight with older, bigger kids and use my name to get out of trouble. Anyway, I can go on forever. And these are literally just the tame things I mentioned. My little brother was evil incarnate. It took years to finally break all contact. Because especially my mom always hoped he'd get better and she even excused his threats and theft, even though he could just ask. He liked stealing our stuff despite the fact that we'd have given it to him if he asked. He'd take money from our pockets, valuables from our rooms, etc. I couldn't go to the bathroom without locking my door, but we finally no longer have contact. It's like this burden is lifted off my shoulders. I no longer have to worry he's threatening, stealing or pressuring my mom, abusing her trust, etc. The anxiety and terror we all felt on a daily basis literally ruined our life. He literally made my mother sick. She was the strongest woman I knew, and this piece of garbage destroyed her bit by bit. He ruined over 20 years of my life, and I will never forgive him for what he did. I do no longer consider him my brother, family, or even an acquaintance, and in all honesty, I won't even go to his funeral and don't want him to come to mine. F him. This is why I believe some people are born evil. This monster had an incredibly loving and supportive family that gave him all the attention he needed or wanted. But it was never enough. It was like absolutely no one except him was real. None of us mattered. He treated his friends and girls the same way. This got even worse because how social and manipulative he was. Everyone who met him thought he was great and funny, until he took their money and one day he just switched and threatened them, spread lies about them, etc. He did absolutely everything to ruin them. He would never, ever forgive anything and was so stubborn that he would cut his own arm just so he could get back at someone or get his revenge. Even though he was always wrong, he made up this delusional stories in his head that made him the one that was the victim. I mean, my mother once refused to give him money because he had stolen €500 from her. He was 15. So he went into her room, and when he couldn't find money he took a scissor and cut up all her clothes and shoes. Then took all the sauces we had at home and squeezed the mayo, ketchup, barbecue sauce and anything else you can imagine on the clothes he cut, all over her floors and carpet in her bed. Even years later this monster used this incident as an example of my mom being a bad mom for treating him wrong. Saying my little sister got pocket money but she couldn't spare to give him some money. He blamed her and my mom to my frustration for years like an idiot. I love her, but this is the one thing I absolutely resent. Apologized to him saying she should have just given him the money. When I got angry about this and explained to my mom she shouldn't ever apologize to him, because in his head it legitimizes his behavior. She simply says she doesn't want to cause any drama and problems in the house. She was scared. The problem is the more she did it the worse it got. Something she now finally realizes. I just keep ranting and I can go on forever. I'm going to stop now. Literally made myself depressed thinking back. Anyway. F him. We're all happier than we've ever been now that we are rid of this human evil. My dad is as much of a narcissist as it gets. I didn't realize that it was abnormal until I moved out of the house and out of state. When I finally came back I remember him calling me one day to tell me to give him $10 because he claimed he needed to grab something to eat. Sorry, but I don't have $10 for you. You don't have $10 to give your dad? Come on, I'll pay you right back. I just needed to go down to the store so I can eat. I don't have it, so you'll have to put on your big boy pants and make some money for yourself. Well, I was gonna ask your sister, but I don't wanna ask her because she's my daughter, you know? I hung up after that. A few minutes later he calls me and says, hey, your sister just sent me the $10. See, it wasn't that hard. A couple months later I heard that he was still asking my sister for money, and then on my sister and my brother-in-law's anniversary, he called and basically blew her up over the phone when she said no, to the point where she was crying on that day of all days. And then he finally said, so you're just gonna let your dad freeze to death outside tonight? My brother-in-law told him not to ever call them again, and I haven't heard from him since. He honestly thinks he is super popular and a good person, but he isn't. I blocked his number and want nothing to do with him anymore. Back to the question though, it's really weird because you end up growing to either be just like them or completely the opposite. I've had to grow up on my own and not be able to have a father figure to show me how to be a man and make smart decisions, or how to be a leader of a household. These are things that I think many people take for granted and don't fully realize how great they have it by having both parents in the house, and have them not be completely focused on themselves. I always envy the people that still get to live with their parents into their 20s. I moved out when I was 18 and I'm almost 30 now, and I wish every day that I had the ability to still live at home and not have to worry about rent, utilities, car payments, insurance, gas, phone, internet, etc. My sister is way too into herself. She has no real friends, but she has like 60,000 Instagram followers. She literally just spends her money on new clothes and the newest iPhone to take selfies. And when I say she has no real friends, I really mean it. She never leaves the house, never had a job, dropped out of high school. But she thinks she's the greatest thing God graced this planet with. I don't really talk to her because anytime I try she's just taking pictures of herself with different outfits. It's really annoying. I don't know why my parents condone and finance this lifestyle. She gets money from my mom, because she's kind of the same way. She just loves the attention. On Easter this year I remember the family sitting down and having dinner and she was on her phone. As usual. And jumped up and started screaming about how many likes she got on her recent post while not breaking eye contact with her phone. She went to her room and we didn't see her the rest of the day. Growing up, She had total control of my life. She criticized what I wore, listened to, ate, everything. If I was different, I was weird. If I liked what she liked, then I was copying her. She tried to scare me multiple times with guns and knives, claiming she never would actually hurt me, but she would hold up a samurai sword to my throat and tell me if I moved I died. Eventually she had a kid when she was 19 and I was 16, and for a year she was a good mother and then decided she didn't want to be a mom anymore. I've seen her ruin countless people's lives, spanning from just stringing them along to drowning their bank accounts to contributing to them being put in jail for domestic abuse. She's still waiting for trial on her charge. I despise her and she is not family to me. I had so many issues growing up that only stemmed from things she did to me, and I don't want to see my niece grow up like that. My parents are doing a wonderful job of raising her, but she doesn't understand why mommy isn't there, and it breaks my heart. 2-year divorce and custody battle. I was a faithful, happy, and devoted husband and father. Gave up my music and my small business to stay home with our child by her request. She displayed great emotional and mental abuse and instability prior our child's birth, was prescribed meds which helped greatly, but went off when our child was conceived and never went back on. My goal was to protect him as much as possible. She got worse and worse again. She started a relationship and affair with another coworker, someone she hired, and hatched a plan to destroy me. Had me arrested, kicked out, left me with no money, job, vehicle, home, and told the court I was an abuser, neglectful of our child, an alcoholic, stolen wasted family funds, etc. Without the court's involvement, she had his education and medical block me. I have access now. Son developed bad asthma and she hid it. He was prescribed 2 inhalers and only gave me 1. When I tried to get in touch with his education and medical, she claims I'm harassing them and causing problems. I went through 4 months supervised visitation for 1 hour a week, 2 CPS investigations. No case was ever opened. I have my son overnights on a more regular schedule now. She still won't settle and still wants sole custody. She took out a $120,000 loan out on our apartment a year ago without my approval or court's knowledge, and they put it in equity. I brought in a forensic psyche who arrested us and said that my test showed I was too well adjusted and therefore I must be in denial, and hers said she is prone to persecutory behavior and ideas and histrionics. I've done nothing but complied with everything, given her every olive branch, and all she does is take and accuse. She told the forensic we had a nanny, no proof and no we didn't, and that I plead guilty to the charges. I didn't and they were dropped by the court. She told the doctor our child's preschool couldn't hold or administer his medication, but I have a recording of them saying they couldn't do. Narcissistic personality disorder. My sister is narcissistic, but also hits points for borderline and historic personal disorder. I prefer to say that she is just a male genital. She conducted a lot of her abuse under my parents' noses. She got me alone, made horrifying comments. The earliest I remember was that she would strip me naked and tie me to a lamppost. I was about 6, she was 13, berate me. This lasted well into her 20s, sulked and conducted the silent treatment. She used to phone me up in my first year of university to berate me because she had a bad day at work. My favorite one is when she told me that it is harder to be the loved one of someone who has an eating disorder than to have an eating disorder. She was banned from family therapy when I was in hospital for my eating disorder. She was led to believe that it was because she lived far away. In reality, it was because the 2 trained therapists said she couldn't take part anymore because she used previous sessions to berate and abuse me. She came to visit me in hospital. She was overheard by 2 patients and kitchen staff lecturing me on the fact that because I had an eating disorder, she wasn't going to have children. This went on for an hour. They reported her to the psychiatric team. She is now, unsurprisingly, a mother. She threatened to self-harm because there was a miscommunication over what my parents would give her boyfriend, now husband, for Christmas. There is so much more. But I choose to laugh at her now. I see how pathetic her attempts are, and I often speak to her as I would a small child, or indeed her own children. She is a good mother, I will say, though I am preparing for when they grow up and develop their own opinions. I'll be there when that happens. My mom loves her and is still trying. My dad finds her irritating but goes along with it for the sake of the grandchildren, whom he adores, and my mother. My sister knows this and plays this to her full advantage. My advice for anyone in this situation? Do not try to change them, do not force an apology. You already know how this goes. There is no reckoning, no dressing down. They will not see the light or change their ways. They don't care and they won't understand. Information diet. My sister knows barely anything about my life, because she is so self-obsessed that she barely asks. I withhold, however, actively. She does not deserve the privilege of knowing what goes on in my life, about how great it is going or how hard I have worked. She will ruin it or dampen it. Learn to gray rock. Learn to ignore, to raise eyebrows and change the subject. Therapy is a given. After all these changes, I feel so free. I set firm boundaries that she is not allowed to cross. I do not give her explanations or reasons. I don't fight her. I tell my colleagues and friends about her, because she is objectively so hilarious in her ignorance and lack of empathy. Her abuse of me is no longer secret, and so she has no power left. I still get scared and anxious, but I know that I can handle her. I also know that deep down, she is empty and insecure and unhappy. I am, after a long journey, a fighter, independent, empathetic and fulfilled. Siblings of abusers, you've got this. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button for more videos like this, and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Please share your own stories with the community, and let us know how you handled the situation in case you are related to a narcissist or sociopath. Have a great day, and stay safe from evil people.